Good afternoon. You know, as hateful as the conversation that was revealed over the weekend was, we have to bear in mind the context. The context was redistricting. It should be clear to everyone by now that if you leave in the hands of elected officials the power to determine their own political districts, this is a recipe for conflict of interest, and it's an invitation to backroom deals. I called, as you know, for an independent commission to do redistricting in Los Angeles more than a year ago. And I see now that council members have taken up that call, and I'm glad that that's true. But we need to act with urgency right now. We have an emergency in our city. We need to begin to heal. We need to restore faith in the redistricting process, in city government, in city leadership. So I have a proposal to offer this afternoon. I'm calling on the City Council immediately to vote to put a special election in the spring of 2023 before our voters. In that election, it should place a charter amendment on the ballot. That charter amendment should be to redraw the lines for 2024 election. Those lines must be drawn independently of elected officials. Now, this amendment that I propose would require the City Council to contract with the County of Los Angeles to utilize LA County's independent redistricting commission process. Under that approach, city officials would neither appoint members of this redistricting commission nor have any veto over the outcome of that commission's work. The new commission's work would simply take effect. I'm also calling on the council to place a larger series of reforms on the ballot in 2024 that would include a truly independent city redistricting commission process for LA's future and enact other reforms. As you know, for example, I've called for cutting city council districts in half to make council districts and council representation much more responsive to the needs of our constituents in the city. And as for the Attorney General's investigation that was announced today, I think the city should welcome that investigation. We all want to get to the truth. That vile conversation, that raises essential questions for all of us about whether the racism reflected in that discussion actually infected the actions in the redistricting process. But whatever the outcome of that investigation, the proposal that I've made today is especially important because the questions I just asked underscore the need to have a redistricting process by which the lines in the city are drawn, to have that process be one in which every voter can have faith, because this ultimately is about political power in this city. And when we allocate political power, we must do so fairly and equitably and transparently and openly. I'm happy to take questions. It's almost impossible to enumerate those concerns. Racism, homophobia, conversations that reflect prejudice against a whole array of Angelenos should never, ever be uttered by any public official. Those ideas should never be harbored by any elected official, ideally by anyone in the city of Los Angeles. We are teaching our children elected officials need to model what it is to be in service. And instead what that conversation revealed was a disgusting series of negative comments about people based only on who they are, their race, their sexual orientation, their religion, their ethnicity. No conversation like that should ever be uttered by an official. And the fact that it was revealed to the public lays bare something that all of us should find the most ugly possible element in public life. We need, in the city of Los Angeles, in every city, throughout the United States, we need elected officials who are always trying to do the right things for the right reasons. I will say, I'm a veteran of the city council and in the state legislature. In Sacramento, I'm a Democrat. I worked with Republicans all the time. I would much rather work with someone whose views I disagree with, but who I know is sincere in trying to express them, to find the common ground with them to do what's good for the people, than I would to work for somebody who might agree with my views, but harbors the positions reflected in that disgusting conversation. Right. Well, yes, obviously. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so when it comes to redistricting, I don't know whether that vocabulary, those conversations, actually made their way into any action by a redistricting commission or ultimately by the city council. I don't know. But for what it's worth, whether it did or did not, nonetheless, the proposal I'm making today is designed to get to the heart of that issue. Because let's say it did, for example. Well, that makes my proposal all the more important to take effect. And if it actually turns out that it didn't, nonetheless, I think that the value of restoring public faith in this process is especially important in a city whose divisions need to heal. Pete? Yes. Excellent question, Pete. So the county process, which I'm calling on the city to follow in this next cycle right away, is a process where the county elections official solicits interest from members of the public. And then once it gets a number, I think it's 60, it then transmits those to the auditor of the county. And the county, again, no elected official involved in this process, then the county auditor randomly chooses from those who are qualified to serve, and then those who've been randomly chosen select the balance. A process like that is independent, truly, of any elected official. Right now, the city charter requires that public officials elected in the city appoint members of a commission. I examined, Pete, whether it would make sense to, under the existing charter, try to find an ordinance that the council could adopt that would create a new redistricting process. But the city charter needs to change if we're going to avoid having elected officials participate in that, which is why I think this approach, which is very creative, could lead to very positive results.
The question is, though, you're going to have that happen in time for 2024 to establish a new city position. In other words, the auditor district of the county. Who would choose those people as far as the city of Los Angeles?
No, the idea would be that for this one redistricting, and by the way, so we're clear, redistricting typically takes place every 10 years, but the charter makes clear that the council can move forward more frequently to do that. My proposal is for this one time to contract with the county to accomplish this process this way, and then in 2024 to have a ballot measure that reflects a city-specific independent approach for the future. It could mirror many of the attributes I just described. Yes.
And that person would have to be for the 2024 election. The question is, do you elect that person? Are they appointed?
No. I think I'm not being clear, Pete. Under the process that the county utilizes. Oh, you could imagine a system in the city. In fact, you might remember when I was running for mayor, I had posted on my website a proposal for how this could work in the city. And in the city, you could have a very similar approach. You could have the city clerk or some other non-elected official oversee this process that I described, that ultimately results in a random selection of people without any elected officials' involvement whatsoever, much like the way the state selects its independent Citizens Redistricting Commission.
Qualified individual. Therein lies the problem. what makes a person qualified to sit there and
Yes.
be on a board for redistricting?
There are, and I promise I'll get to your question, there are a number of criteria that exist in the county's approach that delineate you have to be a resident of the area. There are other elements that we could delineate. But for what it's worth, Pete, those details, which have been worked out at the state level, there are similar criteria. At the county level, those details underlie the key element of my proposal, which is independent commission, free of the involvement of elected officials, doing what matters for the residents of the city so that no one who has a personal stake in the outcome has a role in shaping that outcome. And the reason I'm calling for this to happen today is that all of you have been reporting about the depth of division in our city and the skepticism in city government and the importance of restoring faith and trust and in healing those divisions in Los Angeles. And this is an important antidote to that process, particularly because of how deeply tied power is to redistricting. Please. Hi. Yes. Yes, I think that it's very important that Ms. Martinez take the step that she took today. As you know, I called for that step. I also think it's important for the other officials who were participating in that conversation to do the same. I think those are important steps in healing. I want to underscore, we who are in public office serve as a privilege. We are here to represent what's best for the people of Los Angeles, not what's best for us personally. A theme I just mentioned when I talked about redistricting. Well, that theme also applies to these individuals and to what many of us believe is the essential step of resignation so we can begin to move forward. I don't think that there can be credibility in the actions of people who participated in that conversation, credibility that will be abiding and stick when it comes to votes on key issues. I think those people forfeited the right to participate in those discussions and in those votes when they participated in that conversation, which was so incredibly vile and beneath all of us, let alone people elected to serve and be role models for our kids. Other questions?
What is the status of the new redistricting map? And yes, they were discussing it in October, so a year ago. How close were they to voting on it?
So just to walk us through, Susan, you might remember that the independent commission proposed a map. The council did not adopt it. Instead, the council staff prepared 3 alternatives, one of which was selected, which is kind of a hybrid of some other input from city council members and the commission, and that is those maps would be relevant for the election in 2024. I'm calling to substitute for that map the work of this independent commission, truly independent of all political influence, and I think we can do it in time for the 2024 election cycle. But the council would have to act now, quickly, to put a measure on the ballot that gives the voters the opportunity to direct the council to contract with the county and create this outcome. Correct. Basically, that's correct. To substitute the work of a truly independent team from that which was ultimately ratified, because what was ultimately ratified was a sort of joint product of the so-called independent commission and council input. And I think, as I've said several times now, the credibility of those lines and the power those lines reflect will be tainted now, given this conversation for sure, until there is some substitute provided. And I've been, as you might imagine, in the last couple days, this is all moving very rapidly, striving to demonstrate that there's a way for us to help begin to restore public faith and trust. And I think this is a very important step. I purposely identified a very concrete way to do this, so we're beyond slogans, beyond platitudes. The word reform is an important word, but it has to mean something, and the details of my proposal can get us there.
Mike, you've been a council.
I mean, Mitchell Farrell said, yeah, add more seats. You're saying divide the districts in half, add more seats. Can you get that all done?
Let me be, again, I tried to describe very clear. I think there should be a council action to put a ballot measure on in just a few months in the springtime that focuses on one issue. And that one issue is demanding that the city contract with the county to create this truly independent commission to redo the lines in time for the 2024 elections. Then I think there should be another ballot measure or measures in 2024 that coincides with those elections, that includes for the future an LA-centric independent process, and for the future major changes. Like I suggested, I think council districts should be cut in half. But that does not need to be done today. I do think, however, that it's fundamental that leadership in the city take this moment and recognize that, you know, there are moments in history that you have to seize in order to actually affect meaningful change. This is one of those moments to take advantage of right now. And one thing, in answer to some of the other questions, let me say something else. You know, the conversation that precipitated all this was, of course, a hateful conversation. But I will say, as I've strived to find a silver lining to this, been encouraged by the universal reaction of people from every possible background in the city, of condemnation and at the same time of the striving to do better. As I said in my statements on Sunday and Monday, we are better than this.
There may have been this kind of natural environment with the districting.
The level to which that conversation sunk did surprise me, because I never would anticipate that kind of racism and prejudice and bigotry and homophobia from anyone who serves in public life in Los Angeles. Look, redistricting is always a bare-knuckled process. I understand that. But there are lines that you do not cross. And the question is, that conversation raises, is whether lines were crossed. And I do not know the answer to that question, which is why I welcome the Attorney General's work. We're going to do everything we can to support it, because we need as a team to get to the truth. But again, whatever the outcome of that, it remains the case that my proposal is a necessary component of this, because we have to move forward concretely. The words will not be enough. Yeah, Pete.
Mike, you talk about today. If tomorrow Kevin De Leon and Gil Cedillo do what Barry Martinez did and they walk, you've got 3 vacancies there on the council. You've been to the council yourself. How tough is it going to be to get business done when you're looking at 12 members of the council and holes on relevant committees?
It's going to be arduous, but it can be done, because the council would need to move quickly to find appointments to temporarily fill those seats. It would need to act quickly to call a special election for any district in which there is an opening. In the meantime, you know, I served, for example, after my predecessor, Mr. Yaroslavsky, had been out of office for almost a year, and the council had a caretaker in the 5th Council District before I became a member of the City Council back in the 1990s. We've seen that, but we've also seen different models where people have been given voting powers in the meantime. I will say this: I think it's incredibly important that members of the public who can temporarily lose that representative not be disenfranchised, because the people who are represented by these council members are in Los Angeles among the least empowered people in our city. And I think it's just crucial that if those resignations occur, the council leadership act quickly and decisively to fill those vacancies and to assure there is a voting member as soon as possible, and then to assure a special election is called so the will of people can be expressed.
There's a contradiction there like you wouldn't want to believe. You're expecting these people to act quickly. You saw what had happened when they were trying to replace Mark Ridley Thomas. You realistically think they can move that fast?
What I'm saying, Pete, is fair question. I served on the City Council. I know it can be done. Thank you all very much. Yes, go ahead. Pardon me? You know, I've been doing this so quickly that it's going to be hard. Maybe a little bit later today I can do it if you can get back. I'm sorry. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry.
Names and outlets.
I'm sorry. So Rob is pointing out that I should do the following. John Healy from the LA Times emailed a question. What, if any, consideration should an independent commission give to how economic assets are distributed among districts? I think that's a legitimate criterion for the commissioners to be guided by. We know that there are other criteria in law. You don't want to break up communities of interest, for example. You want to assure that there is some consistency with the geographic lines that already exist. There are other kinds of criteria. I think considering where major economic assets are should be a criterion that the Commission would consider. The other question I received is from Michael Blood at AP, who asks, how does Nuri resign? Must she submit some type of paperwork declaring her intentions, and where does it go? The answer is a letter goes to the city clerk, and that suffices. Thank you all very much.